In the Philippine history, there are events that took place before that we still don't know about. One of it is the Bataan Death March. So what really happened in the Death March? In the Philippines, American forces suffered their greatest military defeat during World War II at the Battle of Bataan. After surrendering, tens of thousands of soldiers were captured by the Japanese and forced to march to prison camps. The Bataan Death March describes how thousands of Filipino and American soldiers died during their march to the detention center and their subsequent imprisonment. Bataan Death March. In April 1942, forced the march of 70,000 US and Filipino prisoners of war, also known as the World War II, captured by the Japanese in the Philippines. From the southern end of the Bataan Peninsula, the surviving and ill-treated prisoners were forced march 101 kilometers to a prison camp. Only 54,000 prisoners lived to march the camp. Up to 10,000 died on the way and others escaped in the jungle. In 1946, the Japanese commander of the march was convicted by a US military commission and executed.
Even before entering World War II, the United States had troops stationed in the Philippines to defend its major Pacific territories, since the Philippines was a colony of the United States at the time. And within hours of attack of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the Japanese began airstrikes against American forces in the Philippines. American forces stationed in the Philippines began taking steps to defend the archipelago by order of General Douglas MacArthur. However, only about 20% of the army were American. Prisonomics wrote that President Franklin D. Roosevelt promised Filipino U.S. citizenship and full veteran benefits if they participated in the war effort against Japan. However, this offer was rescinded by President Harry S. Truman in 1946, with the result that out of an estimated 200,000 Filipino veterans who survived the war, only 4,000 were eligible for citizenship. It was just people.
The Battle of Bataan. When the Japanese attacked the Philippines, Allied soldiers found themselves severely underpowered. The Philippine Defense Forces were severely underarmed, and those who had guns were not even firing the guns. They only had about 20% of their artillery requirements. Their uniforms and shoes were worn and used. This poverty extended to food for several months. The USAFFE held off Japanese attacks but continued to suffer. By early April, food shortage became acute, and survivors recalled eating officers' polo ponies, some animals, and plants. Most of the months of fighting were spent at most on half food. During the bombing, soldiers sometimes died of dysentery and malaria due to lack of medicine. Despite everything, General Douglas MacArthur ordered his men to continue fighting. However, Major General Edward P. King, knowing that his men were on the brink of death, defied his order and approached the Japanese to negotiate a surrender. Major General Edward P. King disobeyed General Douglas MacArthur's order and met with him April 9, 1942. General Kameichiro Nagano, on this day Allied forces surrendered at Bataan.
The Japanese plan was to bring Filipino and American prisoners of war to San Fernando, where they were put on chains, taken to Capas, and to Camp O'Donnell. After being divided into groups of at least 100 people, the Filipino and American prisoners of war were assigned Japanese guard and ordered to march. Bataan Death March lasted for 5 to 10 days. Many of the Filipino and American prisoners of war suffered from illness, malnutrition, or injuries. But whoever remained was executed. Japan stayed behind to kill the stragglers. The group of soldiers was known as the Buzzard Squad. Many still survived because of some local Filipinos who secretly threw foods such as sugar canes and drinking waters. Filipino and American prisoners of war are also subjected to various types of torture during the Bataan Death March. At times, Japanese soldiers hit them indiscriminately with rifles or stabbed them in passing with bayonets. Filipino and American prisoners of war, when not forced to march, were tortured by sunbathing, which required them to stand in direct sunlight for hours. Also, prisoners of war were sometimes pushed in front of a vehicle. US doctors were allowed to set up an emergency station in Lubao, one of the supply points, but they did not receive medical care. According to World War II in the Pacific, at Lubao, some of the seriously wounded and sick were allowed to rest, but after a few days, they were forced to continue their march.
Arriving at O'Donnell. After disembarking the train at Capas, Tarlac, those who survived the harrowing journey were forced to resume the march. Many still died due to malnutrition. Thousands continued to die in prison camps, and few tried to escape. The prisoners were divided into his groups of 10, and all who tried to escape were executed. How many survived? By the time the Filipino and American POWs arrived at Camp O'Donnell, only about 54,000 of the original 72,000 POWs remained. An estimated 9,000 to 16,000 Filipino soldiers and 650 to 2,300 Americans died during the Bataan Death March. Some took 6 days to trek, while others took more than a week to complete the entire trek to Camp O'Donnell.
After Japan's surrender and the release of its prisoner of war, Lieutenant General Masaharu Homa was indicted for atrocities committed during the Bataan Death March. Masaharu was responsible for the Japanese invasion in the Philippines and was the one who ordered to transfer to Camp O'Donnell. He is considered responsible. Bataan Death March is one of the worst war crimes in the Pacific and also in the world. Its horrors are truly a perfect example of why historians have named the Second World War the War Without Mercy.